The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast ocean of light and shadows. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating seats, each one representing a world, a species, a voice in the cosmic democracy. But in the center of it all, one seat remained empty. It had been empty for 3,000 years. Council Speaker Zareth raised her 4 arms and silence fell across the assembly. Her scales shimmered blue-green under the artificial stars that lit the chamber. She was old, even by her people's standards, and she remembered the stories her grandmother told about the humans. "We gather today because of troubling news," Zareth said. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall through the translation devices. "Archaeological teams have found more human artifacts. They are not where they should be." A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through tall grass. The Corbian delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree, spoke up. "Where did they find these artifacts, Speaker?" "On Vega Prime, on the dead worlds of the Helix Nebula, on planets that were supposed to be untouched by any intelligent life." Zareth's voice was steady, but those who knew her could hear the fear underneath. "The artifacts are old, very old. Some are older than our records say humans have been in space." The empty seat in the center seemed to grow larger in everyone's mind. It was a simple chair, made of a strange metal that nobody could identify. The humans had placed it there themselves long ago, before they disappeared behind their solar system's edge, before the council decided it was safer to keep them there. Ambassador Cleek from the insectoid hives clicked his mandibles nervously. "Perhaps these artifacts drifted through space. Perhaps they are not as old as we think." "The artifacts were buried," Zareth said, "deep underground. Some were found in the foundation stones of cities that are millions of years old, cities built by species that died out before humans even existed." The hall fell silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the life support systems and the quiet rustle as thousands of beings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Dr. Yillith, the lead archaeologist, appeared as a hologram in the center of the hall. She was a crystalline, her body looking like living glass that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. But today, even her natural beauty could not hide her fear. "The artifacts show signs of human technology," she said, "but not the technology we remember from 3,000 years ago. This is something else, something we have never seen before." She waved her hand and images appeared in the air above the assembly. Strange machines that seemed to bend space around them, weapons that looked like they could crack planets in half, ships that were bigger than entire moons. "These images were carved into the artifacts," Dr. Yillith continued. "They show humans fighting something terrible. But the humans in these images, they do not look like the humans we remember. The images changed. Now they showed tall figures in armor that seemed to be alive. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but something about them made every being in the hall feel cold. They moved wrong, fought wrong, existed wrong. What were they fighting?" asked the delegate from Centauri Beta. "We call them the Devourers," Dr. Yillith said. "Ancient texts speak of them, creatures that ate entire star systems. They came from the dark between galaxies and nothing could stop them. Nothing except—" She did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew the humans had stopped them. But the cost had been terrible. The cost had been becoming something else entirely. Commander Thex of the warrior caste stood up. His people were proud fighters, but even he looked troubled. "The humans we knew 3,000 years ago were dangerous enough. They fought like demons when cornered. They never gave up, never surrendered. We were glad when they agreed to stay in their home system." "Agreed?" The voice came from the back of the hall. It was Ambassador Narita from the aquatic realms. "Did they really agree, or did we just assume they would stay because we stopped visiting them?" An uncomfortable silence settled over the assembly. The truth was that nobody had tried to contact Earth in over 1,000 years. They had all been too afraid. Zareth looked around the hall, seeing the fear in every face, every sensor cluster, every compound eye. "There is more," she said quietly. "The artifacts, they are not dead. They are still active. They are still working." The fear in the hall became something you could touch, something you could taste. If the artifacts were still working after all this time, what did that say about the humans who made them? "What do you recommend, Speaker?" asked the delegate from the core worlds. Zareth was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the empty seat, remembering the human who had sat there so long ago. Ambassador Chen, his name had been. A small, quiet man who smiled often and spoke softly. But his eyes had been like looking into deep space, dark and full of terrible knowledge. I recommend we do what we have always done, she said finally. We keep watching. We keep the seat empty, and we pray to whatever gods we believe in that the humans never decide to fill it again. The vote was unanimous. Not a single voice spoke against it. But as the assembly began to break up, as thousands of beings started to leave for their homeworlds, nobody noticed the small device that had been quietly recording everything from beneath the empty chair. Nobody saw it power down and begin transmitting its data across impossible distances, using technology that should not have existed. On a small blue-green world at the edge of the galaxy, in a solar system that most star charts no longer bothered to include, someone received the transmission, someone who had been waiting patiently for 3,000 years, someone who smiled. The device under the chair had been there since the day the humans placed it. It had been recording every council meeting, every decision, every moment of fear and doubt. And now, finally, it had recorded something worth sharing. In the depths of space far from the council's sight, ships that had been sleeping for millennia began to wake up. Cities that existed in folded space started to unfold. And across the human worlds a message went out. They remember us. They still fear us. Good. The empty seat would not remain empty much longer, but when it was finally filled again, the council would learn that their fear had been justified. They would learn that keeping the humans isolated had been the only thing protecting the galaxy from something far worse than the devourers. They would learn that humans had spent 3,000 years becoming something that would make their ancestors look tame, and they would shudder at what they had unleashed by simply being afraid. 3 days after the emergency session, Dr. Yillith stood in her laboratory on the research station orbiting Kepler 442b. The recovered data crystals floated in containment fields around her, each one pulsing with a soft blue light. Her crystalline hands shook as she prepared to access the data. She had been putting this off for weeks. The crystals contained memories, recordings from the ancient war. Nobody had seen these records before. Nobody had wanted to. Computer, begin playback of crystal designation Alpha 7, she said. The room darkened and suddenly she was no longer in her lab. She was standing on a battlefield that stretched to the horizon. The sky was black, filled with ships the size of cities, and in the distance, something vast and dark was eating the stars. The devourers. They looked like living nightmares, creatures made of shadow and hunger that consumed everything in their path. Entire fleets of Galactic Council ships fired at them with every weapon they had. It did nothing. The devourers absorbed the energy, grew larger, hungrier. Fall back to the secondary line. The voice belonged to Admiral Kextar, a hero from Dr. Yillith's own people. She watched in horror as his flagship was swallowed whole by something that might once have been a planet. The scene shifted. Now she was in a council meeting chamber, much like the one from 3 days ago. But this chamber was filled with panic. Delegates were screaming at each other in a dozen different languages. We need to evacuate the core worlds, one of them was saying. The devourers will reach them in 6 months. Where can we go? Another replied. They eat everything. Planets, stars, even space itself. Then the chamber doors opened and the humans walked in. Dr. Yillith had seen images of ancient humans before, but these recordings were different. These humans looked normal at first glance. They were small, soft-skinned, with only 2 arms and 2 legs. They looked harmless, but their eyes were like black holes. Ambassador Chen stepped forward. He was the same human who would later place the empty chair in the council chamber. But this was before that. This was when he still believed his species could be saved. We have a solution, he said quietly. What kind of solution? Asked the council speaker of that time, a being whose species had been extinct for millennia. The kind you will not like, Chen replied. The kind that will save the galaxy but damn our souls. The scene shifted again. Now Dr. Yillith was watching the transformation begin. It started small. Human soldiers began using weapons that fed on their own life force. Human ships powered themselves with the suffering of their crews. Human worlds turned their entire populations into living war machines. We studied the devourers, a human scientist was explaining to a horrified council observer. We learned how they consume reality itself, and we realized that to fight them, we had to become something they could not consume. What did you become? The observer asked. The human smiled, and Dr. Yillith felt her crystalline form crack with fear. We became worse than them. The recordings showed the truth of those words. Human fleets that moved like living things, feeding on the space between stars. Human soldiers who could not die because they had forgotten how to be alive. Human worlds that existed in 17 dimensions at once, impossible to find, impossible to destroy. And it worked. The Devourers, creatures that had consumed galaxies, met their match in humanity's willingness to sacrifice everything, including their own nature. The final battle was shown in fragments, pieces of memory so terrible that the recording devices could barely capture them. Humans fighting with weapons made of crystallized time. Devourers screaming as they were fed their own hunger. Reality itself bending and breaking as two impossible forces collided. When it was over, the Devourers were gone. Erased not just from existence, but from the possibility of existence. They would never return because humans had made it impossible for them to have ever existed in the first place. But the humans who remained were no longer human. Dr. Yilleth watched as ambassador. Chen addressed the council one final time. His appearance had not changed, but something fundamental was different. When he moved, space rippled around him. When he spoke, his words had weight that pressed down on reality. "We have won," he said. "The galaxy is safe, but we cannot stay. What we have become, it is not something you should have to look at every day." "What will you do?" the council speaker asked. "We will go home. We will put barriers around our space, and we will try to remember what we used to be." Chen paused, and for a moment Dr. Yilleth saw something almost human in his eyes. "Do not follow us. Do not try to contact us. And whatever you do, do not make us come back." The recording ended. Dr. Yilleth stood alone in her laboratory, her crystalline body still trembling. But there was more. The data crystals contained recent memories, too. Recordings from human space taken by long-range sensors. She activated the next crystal. What she saw made her understand why the council had been right to be afraid. The humans had not disappeared. They had been building. For 3,000 years they had been changing, growing, becoming something that made their wartime selves look primitive. The recording showed cities that existed in folded space, bigger on the inside than their outside dimensions could possibly contain. They showed humans who looked normal until you realized they cast shadows in 11 directions at once. They showed children playing games that involved reshaping matter with their thoughts, and they showed something else. They showed that the humans were watching every council meeting, every decision, every moment of fear about what they might have become. The humans knew about all of it. In the final recording, a human woman looked directly at the camera. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive, perfect in a way that suggested she had designed her own appearance with mathematical precision. "Hello, Dr. Yilleth," she said, even though the recording was supposed to be secret, impossible to trace. "We know you are watching these memories. We know you are afraid," the woman smiled. And Dr. Yilleth's laboratory equipment began to malfunction just from the recording of that expression. "Tell the council something for us," the woman continued. "Tell them that we appreciate being left alone. Tell them that the barriers around our space are not to keep us in. They are to keep everything else out." The recording flickered, and for just a moment Dr. Yilleth saw something impossible. She saw the human woman standing in her laboratory, right there with her, even though she was watching a recording from light years away. "Tell them that we are still human," the woman said. "But human is a much bigger word than it used to be." The recording ended. Dr. Yilleth stood in the sudden silence, knowing that she would have to report what she had seen, knowing that the council would have to decide what to do with this information, knowing that whatever they decided, the humans already knew about it. In the distance, far beyond the range of any sensor, something vast and patient continued its eternal watch over the galaxy, ensuring that nothing like the Devourers could ever threaten it again, and it waited to see what choice the council would make. The message arrived at exactly midnight, Council Standard Time. It appeared simultaneously on every communication device in the Galactic Council building, even ones that were not connected to any network, even ones that had been turned off. The message was simple. "We need to talk." It was signed with a symbol that only the oldest council members recognized, the mark of the Watchers. Speaker Zarath stood in her private chamber, staring at the message on her personal communicator. Her hands were shaking. She had hoped never to see that symbol again. The Watchers were supposed to be a myth, a story told to frighten junior diplomats about the price of knowledge. But Zarath was old enough to remember when they were real, old enough to remember when the council had created them. 3 hours later, she stood in a meeting room deep beneath the council building. The room was supposed to be secure, shielded from any form of surveillance. But as she looked around at the 6 figures seated at the table, she realized that security meant nothing to people who had spent 3,000 years learning how to hide from humans. The leader of the Watchers removed her hood. Her name was Veltar, and she belonged to a species that had been thought extinct for 2 millennia. Her skin was pale blue, almost translucent, and her eyes were completely black. "Thank you for coming, Speaker," Veltar said. "We know this breaks every protocol the Council has about contact with our organization." "Your organization is supposed to not exist," Zarath replied. "The official records say you were disbanded after the human war ended." "The official records say many things that are not true," Veltar said. "We have been watching Earth for 3,000 years. We have been reporting to a council committee that officially does not exist. And now, we need to tell you what we have learned." She gestured, and the lights in the room dimmed. Images appeared, in the air above the table, clearer and more detailed than any hologram Zarath had ever seen. "This is Earth," Veltar said, "as it appears to normal sensors." The image showed a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Cities were visible on the continents, but they looked primitive, simple, the kind of settlements a species might build when they were just learning to reach for space. "This is Earth as it really is," Veltar continued. The image changed, and Zarath felt her breath catch in her throat. The planet was still there, but now she could see what was hidden beneath the surface. Cities that extended through dimensions she had no names for. Transport networks that folded space like paper. Energy sources that drew power from the rotation of the galaxy itself. "How long have you known?" Zarath asked. "We suspected after the 1st century," Veltar said. "We confirmed it after the 2nd. The humans never stopped building. They never stopped evolving. What we see on the surface is just what they want us to see." Another Watcher spoke up, a creature that looked like a living shadow. "We have been trying to map their real civilization for 3,000 years. We estimate we have successfully cataloged less than 1% of it." 1%? Zarath could barely speak. "The humans exist in at least 11 dimensions simultaneously," the shadow creature continued. "Their cities phase in and out of reality. Their ships travel through spaces that do not technically exist. And their population." The creature paused, and Zarath could sense its fear. "How many humans are there?" she asked. "We do not know," Veltar admitted. "We have identified at least 14 billion living on Earth itself, but there are human settlements in places that should be impossible. Inside stars, in the space between atoms, in timelines that split off from our own reality." She showed more images. Humans walking on the surface of a neutron star, as if it were solid ground. Human children playing in what appeared to be a pocket universe they had created for their own amusement. Human adults casually reshaping matter with tools that looked like simple jewelry. "They know about us," another Watcher said. This one appeared to be made of living crystal, similar to Dr. Yilith's species. "They have always known. Every probe we send, every sensor we place, every attempt we make to observe them secretly. They are aware of all of it." "Then why do they let you continue?" Zarath asked. "Because they find it amusing," Veltar said. "We have recordings of human conversations about us. They call us the Neighborhood Watch. They think we are cute." The word hit Zarath like a physical blow. Cute. The most advanced surveillance operation in galactic history, and the humans thought it was cute. "There is more," Veltar continued. "The barriers around their solar system. The ones we thought were to keep them contained. What about them? They are not barriers. They are filters. They allow certain things to pass through and block others. And recently the settings have been changing." Veltar showed a new image. The solar system looked normal, but there were patterns in the space around it, structures that bent light and gravity in ways that should not have been possible. "What are they filtering?" Zarath asked. "Us," Veltar said simply. They have been protecting us. For 3,000 years they have been stopping things from reaching this part of the galaxy. Things that would make the Devourers look harmless. The room fell silent. Zareth stared at the images, trying to process what she was being told. What kind of things? We do not know, the Crystal Watcher said. Every time we try to scan beyond their barriers, our equipment fails. But we have detected signatures, energy patterns that suggest threats from outside our galaxy, from places where the laws of physics work differently. The humans are holding them back, Veltar continued. They have turned their entire civilization into a fortress, not to protect themselves from us, but to protect us from everything else. Zareth thought about the council meeting 3 days ago, about the fear in every delegate's voice, about the empty chair that had haunted them for millennia. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Veltar's expression grew even more serious. Because the filters are changing. The humans are adjusting their defenses, and we think they are preparing for something. Preparing for what? We believe they are going to make contact, Veltar said. After 3,000 years of isolation, they are going to rejoin galactic civilization. That is what we have always wanted, Zareth said, but even as she spoke the words, she knew they were not true. Is it? Veltar asked. Are you prepared for a species that treats the laws of physics as suggestions? Are you ready to negotiate with beings who could reshape this entire galaxy on a whim? Are you comfortable sitting at the same table as creatures who have spent 3 millennia becoming something that makes gods look primitive? Zareth had no answer. There is one more thing, Veltar said quietly. We intercepted a transmission from Earth yesterday. It was addressed to the Council. What did it say? It was a request for an updated copy of the Council's membership roster. They want to know who they will be dealing with when they return. Veltar stood up and the other Watchers began to gather their equipment. We have done our job, she said. We have watched, and we have learned, and now we have reported. What the Council does with this information is no longer our responsibility. Where will you go? Zareth asked. Somewhere very far away, Veltar replied. Somewhere we can watch what happens next from a safe distance. As the Watchers filed out of the room, the crystal being paused at the door. Speaker, it said. When the humans return, remember this. They could have conquered the galaxy at any time in the last 3,000 years. The fact that they chose not to is the only reason any of us are still alive. The door closed and Zareth was alone with the knowledge that would change everything. In the distance, beyond the reach of any surveillance except that which chose to be detected, something vast and ancient began to move toward the center of the galaxy. The humans were coming home. The first outer rim system died on a Tuesday. The colony on Zerion Prime had been home to 12 million beings from 6 different species. It had orbital platforms, defense stations, and one of the most advanced warning systems in the galaxy. When the attack came, they had exactly 17 seconds to send a distress signal before everything went silent. Fleet. Admiral Korvex received the alert while reviewing patrol reports in his command center above Rigel. He was a veteran of 43 conflicts, a being who had seen every kind of warfare the galaxy had to offer. But when he looked at the sensor readings from Zerion Prime, his blood turned to ice. Sir, his communications officer said, her voice shaking, we are receiving similar alerts from 3 other systems. Theron, Avalon, and New Geneva, all Outer Rim colonies. Show me, Korvex said. The main display filled with images from the dying systems. But there was nothing to see. No attacking fleets, no weapon signatures, no signs of battle. The colonies simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, sending routine communications. The next moment there was only empty space. Send the 7th Fleet to investigate, Korvex ordered. 6 hours later, the 7th Fleet arrived at what had once been Zerion Prime. Their report was short and terrifying. System completely empty. No debris, no radiation, no sign that anything was ever here. Space itself appears to have been cleaned. Within a week, 12 more systems had vanished, all of them Outer Rim colonies, all of them disappearing without warning or trace. The Council emergency session was called after the loss of Kepler Station, a major trading hub with a population of 30 million. Speaker Zarath stood before the assembled delegates, but this time she was not alone. The greatest military minds in the galaxy surrounded her, and all of them looked afraid. "We are facing an enemy unlike anything in our records," she announced. "They do not conquer worlds. They do not steal resources. They erase everything, leaving no trace that anything ever existed." Grand Admiral Thessia of the Centauri Defense Force stepped forward. Her people were known for their tactical brilliance, but even she seemed lost. "We have deployed our most advanced fleets to create a defensive perimeter. Early warning systems have been placed throughout the galaxy, but we do not know what we are fighting." The holographic display above the assembly showed the galaxy in 3 dimensions. Red zones marked the areas that had been erased, and they formed a pattern that made everyone uncomfortable. The destruction was moving inward, toward the galactic core following the major trade routes. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" asked the delegate from the Crystalline Confederation. "At their current rate of advance, 6 months, Admiral Thessia replied. The hall erupted in panic. Delegates began shouting in dozens of languages, some demanding evacuation plans, others calling for impossible defensive measures. But through it all, one voice cut through the chaos. "Have you asked the humans for help?" The question came from Ambassador Narita of the Aquatic Realms. The hall fell silent as every being turned to stare at her. "That is not an option," Speaker Zarath said quickly. "Why not?" Narita pressed. "They defeated the Devourers. They might know how to stop this." "The humans are dangerous," another delegate protested. "We isolated them for good reason." "More dangerous than complete extinction?" Narita shot back. The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Some delegates argued that humanity was a worse threat than the mysterious enemy. Others pointed out that extinction was extinction, regardless of who caused it. In the end, desperation won. The vote was close, 847 in favor of contacting Earth, 23 against, with 91 abstentions. Speaker Zarath sent the message herself, using the old diplomatic codes that had not been activated in 3,000 years. The transmission was simple. "The galaxy faces extinction. We request assistance." The response came back in less than 10 minutes. It was a single word. "No." The council chamber exploded into chaos again. Delegates demanded explanations, threatened sanctions, made promises of future cooperation. But the human response remained the same. No. For 3 days, the council tried everything. They offered technology, resources, even political control of entire sectors. Each offer was met with the same single-word response. On the 4th day, as reports came in of 5 more systems being erased, a new message arrived from Earth. This one was longer. "You have been fighting them for 2 weeks. We have been fighting them for 3,000 years. This is not your war. Go hide in your bunkers and let us work." Admiral Thessia was the first to understand. "They have been fighting this enemy all along," she said. "The barriers around their space. The isolation. They were not hiding from us. They were protecting us." As if summoned by her words, the displays around the chamber began showing new data. Long-range sensors throughout the galaxy were detecting something unprecedented. Massive energy signatures moving through space at impossible speeds. "What are we looking at?" Speaker Zarath asked. The sensor technician's voice was barely a whisper. "Ships, thousands of them, moving from the direction of Earth toward the outer rim. But when the displays showed the tactical readings, nobody could make sense of them. The ships were enormous, larger than space stations, but they moved like fighters. They traveled faster than light without using any recognizable form of propulsion, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in the database." "How many ships?" Admiral Thessia asked. We cannot count them, Admiral. They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our sensors cannot track them properly. The first engagement occurred at the edge of the Vega system. The Council's long-range monitors barely detected the battle before it was over. When the energy signatures faded, the mysterious enemy was gone. The human ships remained for exactly 60 seconds, then vanished as quickly as they had appeared. A second battle occurred near the Rigel cluster. This time the Council managed to get partial recordings. What they saw defied explanation. The enemy appeared to be made of living darkness, creatures that existed partially outside normal space. They moved by consuming reality itself, leaving trails of nothingness behind them. Their weapons turned matter into void, erasing targets from existence rather than destroying them. Against them came the humans. But these were not the humans from the historical records. These were beings that moved through 11 dimensions at once, wielding weapons that rewrote the fundamental forces of physics. They fought by changing the rules of reality, making it impossible for their enemies to exist. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the dark entities were gone. Not destroyed, not defeated, but made never to have been. The human ships lingered for a moment, and then they too faded from sensors. A message appeared on every council communication device. Perimeter restored. Recommend you update your charts. Several systems that you thought existed never did. Speaker Zareth stared at the message, trying to process its implications. The humans had not just defeated the enemy. They had erased the enemy's very existence, making it so the destroyed systems had never been attacked in the first place. But that was impossible. She remembered the colonies. She remembered the people who had died. Another message arrived. Memory reconciliation in progress. You will remember the truth for approximately 6 more hours. Use that time to decide whether you want to know what really happened. Around the chamber, delegates were looking confused. Some were checking their notes, trying to remember why they had called this emergency session. Others were staring at star charts that showed systems they were sure had been destroyed. Systems that were now marked as uninhabited and always had been. Zareth felt her own memories beginning to shift. The crisis that had seemed so urgent an hour ago was becoming fuzzy, uncertain. Soon she would remember this as just another routine council meeting. But for now, she still remembered the truth. The humans had not just protected the galaxy. They had rewritten history itself to do it. They had made the threat never exist, but they had given the council 6 hours to remember what had really happened. It was a gift, she realized. A chance to understand what humanity had become. A chance to choose whether they wanted to live with that knowledge. In 6 hours, the galaxy would forget this crisis had ever happened. But in the space between memory and forgetting, the council would have to decide what they were going to do about the empty chair. The humans were waiting. The empty chair filled itself on a Thursday. Speaker Zareth was conducting a routine session about trade regulations when the air above the ancient seat began to shimmer. The delegates noticed it first as a whisper, then as a murmur, then as complete silence as every being in the chamber stopped talking and stared. The shimmer became a figure. She appeared slowly, like someone walking out of deep water into bright sunlight. She was human, clearly, but she was also something more. She looked young, perhaps 30 years old by ancient human standards, with dark skin and silver hair that moved as if touched by a wind that no one else could feel. Her eyes were the deep blue-black of space between stars. When she was fully materialized, she sat down in the chair that had waited for her for 3,000 years. "Hello," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber without amplification. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen Martinez. I am the current speaker for Earth. We apologize for being late." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then Speaker Zareth found her voice. "Welcome to the Galactic Council," she said, falling back on diplomatic protocol because it was the only thing her mind could grasp. "Though we were not expecting... You were not expecting us to return," Dr. Chen Martinez said with a smile that was warm and terrible at the same time. "We understand. We have been away for a long time." She looked around the chamber, and as her gaze passed over each delegation, the representatives found themselves remembering things they had forgotten. The crisis that had never happened. The systems that had been erased and restored. The battles that had been fought in the spaces between realities. "We know that our absence has been difficult for you," she continued. "We know that you have questions about what we have become, about what we have been doing while you governed the galaxy." Ambassador Cleek from the insectoid hives clicked his mandibles nervously. "Dr. Chen Martinez, if we may ask, what exactly have you been doing?" "Growing up," she replied simply. The answer hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Chen Martinez stood and walked to the center of the chamber, her feet not quite touching the floor. 3,000 years ago, we saved the galaxy from the devourers, she said. But in doing so, we became something you could not understand, something that frightened you. So we agreed to isolate ourselves until we could find a way to be human again. "And have you?" asked the delegate from Centauri Beta. "We have learned that being human is not about what we were," Dr. Chen Martinez said. "It is about what we choose to do with what we have become." She gestured, and the chamber's displays came alive with images that made every delegate gasp. They showed the galaxy as it really was, not as their sensors perceived it. They showed the vast network of defenses that humanity had built in the dark spaces between stars. They showed the threats that humanity had been fighting while the Council debated trade laws. For 3,000 years we have been the galaxy's immune system, she said. We have fought 17 different species that came from outside our reality. We have prevented 43 reality-ending paradoxes. We have stopped 6 different attempts by cosmic entities to use this galaxy as food. The images showed battles on scales that hurt to contemplate. Human defenders fighting creatures made of crystallized time. Ships that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously battling hive minds that consumed probability itself. Humans reshaping the fundamental forces of physics to prevent the universe from being unraveled by entities that existed before existence began. You have been protecting us, Speaker Zareth said. It was not a question. Yes, Dr. Chen Martinez replied, and we will continue to do so. But we have decided that it is time to stop hiding what we are doing. She returned to her seat, and the chair seemed to welcome her like an old friend. The barriers around our space are coming down, she announced. Human ships will once again travel openly through the galaxy. Human citizens will visit your worlds, trade with your merchants, study in your universities. We will take our place in galactic civilization again. The chamber erupted in a mixture of excitement and terror. Some delegates welcomed the return of humanity's advanced technology and protection. Others voiced fears about what a species of reality-manipulating post-humans might do to the balance of power. What assurance do we have? Asked the delegate from the warrior caste. That you will not use your abilities to dominate us? Dr. Chen Martinez looked at him with something like pity. Commander Thex, if we wanted to dominate you, do you think we would have asked permission? She gestured again, and suddenly every delegate could see their own homeworlds. Not through sensors or recordings, but as if they were actually there. They could smell the air, feel the gravity, hear the sounds of their families going about their daily lives. We could have taken control of everything at any moment in the last 3 millennia, she said. We could have reshaped your governments, rewritten your histories, redesigned your species themselves. We chose not to because that is not what humans do. The visions faded, leaving the delegates shaken. What do you want from us? Speaker Zareth asked. Cooperation, Dr. Chen Martinez said. The threats we have been fighting are getting stronger. The next wave will require all of us working together. You have something we need. What could we possibly have that you need? Perspective, she said. We have become very good at protecting the galaxy, but we have forgotten how to live in it. We need you to help us remember what it means to be part of a community instead of its guardians. She stood again, and this time she walked to Speaker Zareth's podium. The ancient politician felt her breath catch as the human woman approached, sensing the vast power contained in that deceptively fragile form. We propose a new arrangement, Dr. Chen Martinez said. Humanity will provide protection and advanced technology. In return, the Council will help us learn how to be citizens again instead of gods. And if we refuse, asked the delegate from the core worlds, then we will continue protecting you anyway, she replied with a sad smile. Because that is what we choose to do, but it would be much easier if we could do it together. The vote was unlike any in Council history. It was not about politics or resources or territory. It was about whether the galaxy was ready to accept that its children had grown up into something unrecognizable, but still fundamentally good. The final tally was 1,047 in favor, 31 against, with 78 abstentions. As the vote was announced, Dr. Chen Martinez sat back down in the chair that was no longer empty. And in that moment, every being in the chamber felt something change. The galaxy suddenly felt safer, more stable, as if it had been missing something important and had finally found it again. Thank you, she said simply. We promise you will not regret this decision. In the weeks that followed, human ships began appearing throughout the galaxy. They were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Vessels that moved like living art and bristled with technologies that made reality itself seem negotiable. Their crews were humans who looked normal until you realized they cast shadows in 11 directions and spoke in harmonies that included notes from parallel dimensions. But they were also unmistakably, undeniably human. They laughed at jokes. They fell in love. They made friends. They brought gifts of impossible technology and asked for nothing in return except the chance to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere The empty chair had been filled at last, and the galaxy discovered that it had never needed to fear its children. It had only needed to trust them. In the depths of space, beyond the edge of reality, something vast and hungry turned its attention toward the galaxy once more. But this time it found not a collection of scattered, frightened civilizations, but a unified community protected by guardians who had spent 3,000 years learning how to fight the impossible. It decided to look elsewhere for its next meal. The humans had come home, and they had brought the future with them.